Good afternoon, Judge. I apologize. My name is Lisa Lewis. I am the senior supervisor in Juvenile. Ms. Moschella couldn't be here today due to something unexpected, so I'll be here for her to help cover or assist.
All right. Do you have the same ability to make policy decisions as she does?
No, so I should say I am in limited capacity to assist and help with whatever I can, but I will do my best.
Madam Chair, I'm going to be hosting and hopefully in September, I'm going to be hosting a swimming training for parents and family. So, as a mental health capacity, one way of dealing with stress and trauma.
Swimming, huh?
Yeah.
Water rusts nails and sinks ships. I'm not sure I want to. I want to tangle with that.
As long as we know how to swim, like my brother from Alabama.
Well, I grew up in North Philly, in the inner city, and the pools were not all that sanitary. My dad didn't want us in that water, so his alternative, he took us to Atlantic City. There is no way in the world you can learn to swim in the Atlantic Ocean. So, and then I was going to take swim lessons, and I had a good friend, and we were at the state attorney's office together. But she passed away, and I took that as God's sign. Stay out the water. I've been baptized enough.
All righty then, Judge. On that note, we are going
to get a quarter.
All right, we're going to have to workshop it until we get two more, because though Ms. Moschella has a stand-in, neither of the folk who are standing in have voting privileges. Only the person that was designated prior to it in writing. So we'll have to workshop it until we get two more members. You're muted. Okay. Muted again.
Muted, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Got it? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
All right. Well, I just want to welcome everyone here, and I think we're going to have a pretty good meeting. I apologize again for my absence last month. It could not be helped, but I do want to thank Mr. Weeks and Secretary Ellison for stepping in and conducting the meeting. I do want to we have to move on because we don't have a quorum yet, so we're not going to deal with the approval of the minutes or the agenda, but I can have you all who are on the screen introduce yourselves, because we have members of the public who are viewing. I'll start with myself. My name is Alona Holmes. I'm a retired circuit judge, and I have the honor of chairing this CAB.
Marsha Ellison, President, Fort Lauderdale Broward NAACP.
And Secretary of this CAB.
Secretary of this CAB, yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Right. Mr. Weeks.
Hello, my name is Gordon Weeks. I'm the public defender. I'm also the vice chair of the CAB. Thank you.
Mr. Obel. Okay, go. All right, go on. Ella, do that again. I was trying to wake up Mr. Obel. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Ella Phillips, DJJ Advisory.
Michael Bell, CEO of Community-Based Connection, community partner.
All right, and then we have some people who are sitting in for our members, but they don't have voting privileges. So, Ms. Lewis, why don't you introduce yourself again?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Lisa Lewis. I'm the senior supervisor in the Youth Justice Unit for the Broward County State Attorney's Office, and I'm standing in today for ASA in charge Gloria Moschella.
Thank you. Chief Sterling, you.
Marco, I'm filling in for Colonel Holmes today.
Okay. Mr. Walters, if I can get Mr. Walters in to chime in.
Roosevelt Walters, and I dance at the music of the chair.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Starling, you're in for Mr. Tevis Bush.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Gregory Starling, Probation Manager, Chief Probation Officer for Juvenile Justice. I'm sitting in for Chief Bush today.
All right, Major, if I can get you to.
I'm Major Anthony DeMarco, and I'm filling in for Colonel Homestead in Broward Sheriff's Office.
Okay. Madam Secretary, if you'll let me know when we have a quorum, I'll go back over the minutes.
Yes,
I
I'm
don't
reaching
look-
out to members now. The Major said that he sent you an email. Because of everything that's going on with Fort Lauderdale, they have been displaced, and so he's not able to get on today.
Okay.
All that noise and construction while they're building the new Taj Mahal over there is caused them to be displaced as well. So he is not able. So that means we heard from both him and thank you and heard from
I don't have an email from him because I checked it and I have my email.
I think he may have texted, but I just
I don't
texted,
I don't think London has my number, but I'll check for that.
Okay. In any case, he is
Okay.
excused today. And I'll reach out to Miss Brown as well. I haven't yet. I'm gonna do it now.
All right.
All right, have we heard from the judge?
No, I've not heard from either Judge Robola or Judge Williams. So,
Okay.
all right, we'll go on. Something interesting came up towards the end of last month's meeting, and I think Ms. Brown asked the question, do we have a problem with DEI? That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I had to chuckle, and I ran that part of the meeting back 2 or 3 times. We don't have that problem with this. DEI normally only goes for good stuff, like tenure positions, appointed positions, but nobody's fighting about diversity and inclusion in the jails. And we're trying to keep our youth out of the jails. Certainly there is an overabundance and overrepresentation of our Black youth in these jails. So I guess that takes care of the inclusion part. But I really don't believe that what we do as a board, our task is to make recommendations to the Secretary of DJJ about how we can make things better. And so if that involves making sure that every youth gets the same opportunity for a civil citation or a diversion program or something that keeps them out of silver bracelets, then I firmly believe that we don't have that issue. And even if it does become an issue, somebody wants to debate me on that, I'm ready, willing, and able and available. I got receipts to show. So so never be afraid to speak out on this cab as to what we do and what we're trying to do on behalf of our children. There was a committee formed, Colonel Holmes and Mr. Obel were on it, and I kind of sat in on some of the meetings. Our concern was that our children, when they reach out to get involved with programs, could be after school or something like that, that if it's a DJJ program, their information, their names, their date of birth, their demographics, if you will, are entered into the JIS system. And these children have not committed any delinquent acts. They've not committed any crimes of anything. It's just that their parents don't want them at home by themselves. And so they want to do something, a program. Mr. Starling, we talked about that when you were sitting in as the liaison for DJJ. And so we tried to, and I really wanted to have something in place for the summer. And that's where Mr. Obel and Colonel Holmes came into play. I listened to find out, and I'm happy that Deerfield Beach, that was my first home city when I moved here from Philadelphia, has some programming going on. I think another question was asked by Mr. Weeks as to, is there anything that further than Deerfield, further south than Deerfield? So Mr. Obel, can you kind of enlighten us on what you and I know you all were going to have a meeting, so can you report out on what's going on?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Michael Bell, CEO, Community-Based Connection, Community Partner for the meeting. So in regards to Deerfield, my COO and clinical director met with the ED over there for the Sheriff Department in Deerfield. So there's been some progress and there are some things in motion that's happening there. In regards to Fort Lauderdale Central Area Broward, Mr. Weeks and I, Public Defender Weeks and I had conversation with other members from this board and other stakeholders that met with us. Obviously, from the state attorney Pryor was there on that call, and we had the conversation of what needs to be done. And I know State Attorney Pryor mentioned that we need to have DJJ involved. So I did receive Mr. Bush's cell phone number. I'll be reaching out to him and get his email so he can be a part of the conversation of how we go about providing those supportive services. However, I know while we have some concerns in some areas regarding certain involvement, at the end of the day, we know we need all parties at the table, so we all on the same page. So, long story short, we'll be having a follow-up meeting. I know, I think John James will be representing Mr. Weeks' office, and someone will be representing the state attorney office to further our next dialogue with the DJJ chief on the board, chief member to be at the meeting.
Well, you mentioned at the last meeting 2 reporting programs. I think SAMUS is one, and I forget the other name. You know, I've said before, it's DJJ's money, therefore you have to follow their rules. But I just don't see the rationale of inputting a kid that hasn't had any problems with the law or in disciplinaries in school. Just because they want to stay out of trouble, they get put in a program in a computer. And police officers are looking at that computer and say, oh, well, if this kid is in the computer, must have done something. And so we want to try to avoid that. Major DeMarco, do you know of any other programs? The program in Deerfield is spearheaded by BSO.
As a matter of fact, this evening we're having our summer lead camp graduation at Boyd Anderson High School. We took 30 youth from the community over the summer and did an 8-week course with them on Saturdays. They came in at 8 o'clock in the morning and we spent the whole day with them. We did entrepreneurship. We took them to JA World. We took them to a bank where they learned about debit cards and financing and compound interest. We had some entrepreneurs from the community come in and talk to them about building businesses. We took them to Daisy Penny's, and we had some donors that bought them some, as a matter of fact, the clothes that they're going to wear for the graduation tonight, and they're all going to get school supplies. So we spent 8 weeks with these individuals every Saturday, and the persons that did this volunteered their time from the sheriff's office. These were deputy sheriffs, detention deputies, civilian employees here at the sheriff's office. So we were able to do that again this summer, which turned out to be an excellent program again. So thanks to our partners in the community, some restaurants, we had some Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, we had a bunch of our community partners who came in and provided breakfast every morning and lunch every afternoon. So that was a very successful program. We're looking to do that every summer. That was one of the initiatives that Sheriff Tony tasked us with doing this year again. Very positive feedback from the families. We have a survey that we have the families fill out at the end of the course, and we're hoping to get those back tonight at the graduation. So if anybody's available, Boyd Anderson High School tonight, 6:30 to 8.
Right. Any questions of Mr. Obel or Major DeMarco?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Walters.
it's not so much a question to them as it's going to be a question to you. And I thought the question from you was concerning the login of the information on the youth by DJJ. And I have not heard an answer to that question, and I'm still concerned, as I mentioned in the last meeting. We continue to find ways to track our youth, and you know, I'm also wondering when they fill out an application and it says, "Have you ever been referred to a community program?" What's the answer?
Well, you know, that was the whole point of trying to, I don't want to say circumvent, but come up with solutions or to the problem. Mr. Starling, Chief Starling is here, and I had this discussion with him. He told me he was going to look into it. Then he moved on, and I got Mr. Bush, and when I'm here, Mr. Bush is not. When Mr. Bush is here, I'm not. So one day we're going to be in the same Zoom. But Chief, you said you were going to look into that. Is there any way, you know, I do know it's DJJ's money, and so therefore he who has the money sets the rules. But these kids haven't done anything to get into a computer. You know, have you given it any thought, and have you discussed it with Mr. Chief Bush?
Well, actually, you know, a while back when I first came on as far as the interim, so Karen Butterfield, along with myself, because she was the one to meet as well. So since she, you know, having an office out of headquarters as well. So we went through the process of, okay, how do we get there with the prevention well, you know, who have access, and then we also have the civil citation program. So therefore, the prevention well was in place before civil citation came on board. So when civil citation came on board, they decided to just now use that platform. But before we go further, like Mr. O'Bell, he has raised a very valid concern, and I agree with him 100%. So I have shared this with my assistant secretary. So what we actually need, because the prevention, obviously we have prevention representation. So I did go to the second leadership and prevention, Marcus, who and I, we had a long discussion. So because the prevention well was before civil citation, so therefore, when Secretary Walters decided to just house these civil citation kids over there to find a place in JGIS, that became the home. But certainly it is something we need to look at. So what was suggested is that as a board, because as a chief independently in probation, we have 4 branches. So as a Circuit 17 board, as far as authoring a letter to DJJ, as far as the overall concerns that you have, that's where you would need to start. So as an individual chief, that would be the recommendation as far as Circuit 17 expressing their concerns, authoring a letter to DJJ from the advisory board, and then bird dogging it as far as your interest.
Well, Madam Secretary, that certainly can be a part of our report that we have to file every year. I'm not sure that an independent letter to the secretary is going to mean anything. I'd rather have it as a part of our board report that goes on the DJJ web, so that they'll know we're working on it. We're trying to come up with alternatives, not to penalize a child just because they want to stay out of trouble. So, and Mr. Walters raises a very valid concern. So yes.
Question, and I'm not sure if Chief Starling knows. Tell me the rationale behind those children who are participating in these programs, such as if they any program, it's a YMCA, and they took some money from DJJ to have their program. What's the rationale behind those kids' names being put into the prevention web?
Yeah, the prevention well, because it was prevention well was already established.
No, I'm not talking about civil citation. I'm not talking about diversion. I'm talking about those local organizations that get money from DJJ, as a requirement of receiving those dollars, they have to put their children or allow those children's information to be put into the prevention web. Has nothing to do with civil citation at all.
Yeah, the prevention web, it is a housing part of our JGIS system. So as far as data points.
Why, you don't answer my question. Why must a program allow children who have never been in any trouble? The only thing they're doing is playing basketball or that program because they can't afford to go to a park and pay for one. Why would a program, in order to have monies from DJJ to help have these programs, have nothing to do with civil citation, never been arrested, just a regular program, why is a requirement of those organizations to have the children's information housed in JJIS?
It's the tracking system that we have for DJJ as far as the overall statewide Florida DJJ tracking system for all youth that's involved with juvenile justice as it relates to any funding that's associated with it. And obviously there are other data points that we're also using as part of our JJI system as well.
Well, why do you need to track babies who are not in trouble?
Because there's funding that we are providing. And so obviously you have to ensure that if there is recidivism or there are other things that we can ascertain, programs that are in prevention, there are assessment tools that we're utilizing. So we're taking data from those assessment tools and we're using that data to increase opportunities if we see where there are some particular deficiencies in communities or needs that are identified. So it also gives us an opportunity to funnel monies in a direction where we see where there's a greater need based on some of the assessments that are being done for those children who are in our prevention programs.
I think the price is too high to add, if my child's name specifically has to go into the system. You know, why would it have to be included in with these other children who have made mistakes? The only mistake these families are making is thinking that these children are going to be, the gain is going to be greater than the loss from participating in a program that has nothing to do with being in trouble. They're thrown in altogether. I would just caution anyone who is taking this money, you know, as we move forward from an NAACP standpoint, because the price is just too high. I don't know why you need to track, you know, Lil Roosevelt because he played basketball. And when we know by the own admission of the sheriff, one who, Pinellas, who leads the Stoneman Douglas committee, saying they're using these to determine the outcome of whether they're going to arrest these children. They're not knowing whether this is a prevention program. They don't, quite frankly, don't really care in many cases. So how the information is being used hurts these children. And so I would hope that any parent, and maybe we need to do a better job of that, Mr. O'Bell, I know your organization has moved in a different direction. And I have spoken to several of members of the Divine Nine who, once they realized that the penalty that these children pay to participate in their program, stopped accepting those monies. But I think we need to do a better job from this board standpoint, letting folks know the price that children pay to participate in a program that takes money from DJJ. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Mr. Sterling, we've had this discussion, but we're going to keep having it till we can come up with a solution. Yes, Mr. Walters.
I just want to say that I agree with Madam Secretary / President 100%. And I want to ask Mr. Sterling that in the funding process, does DJJ fund names or numbers?
As it relates,
do you fund Little Roosevelt and Little Marshall, or do you fund two youth?
yeah, so since I spend more of my time on the probation side, so I'm not into the weeds of that particular area. That is a prevention arena. So I don't want to speak not knowing the details.
Can you give us a name of someone who can come on and speak to us about that?
Well, we have our prevention leadership, so we can actually invite the assistant secretary for prevention, or either she could then dedicate who she would have participate in the board for C17 as a representative.
We want answers. We started talking about this in February.
I'm sharing with you. So the different narratives, again, I can assure you, and again, if you're not working that system, so just like our juvenile probation officers, some of them cannot even see. It's understanding the system in itself. So as an example, when I was saying that when we established the prevention well, that was the system. So therefore, no one had access to it. So only the providers, our probation officers did not have access to it, only certain personnel. So that was housed alone. So to your point, Madam Secretary Ellison, that what the system was for, period. So it had no association with the Sheriff's Department. No one can see it. However, when civil citation came along, they dumped it into that part of the system on that platform. That's what now puts us in this predicament. So the response I received from prevention is that they were there first already. So as a department, that is something that we can now need to take a look at. So when I was saying earlier, as a board, as far as a community concern, yes, alternate letter, whether it's to the secretary, whether it's to the governor, or just, and again, out of your work groups and the things that we're introducing, things to help and improve kids' lives. Yeah, these are things that the board do have to bring to DJJ's attention. And so as a board and as a community, you would bring your concerns to the DJJ. Obviously, we have a secretary, and it goes through its process and protocols, entertaining the interests and concerns of every community throughout the state of Florida, all 20 circuits.
Well, we have found it's not a broad alternative, but the fact that BSO was able to handle a program, you know, and they get my tax dollars too. But these kids are not in and you could correct me if I'm wrong, because Colonel Holmes assured me that they wouldn't be, but Major, were these kids inputted into any type of computer system whereby your deputies could go in and track them? It's like a FTO card, if you will, just because they participated in your program.
Absolutely not. We have a spreadsheet with their names on them only for contact, so that we can keep in touch with these individuals to invite them to future programs. We signed a few of them up for our Police Explorer program. We have a couple of them that we set up with mentors in their school with their SRO. But no, there's no data entry point that would put them into any database that mixes with anything other than just getting to know those individuals and keeping in touch with them as mentors.
It's doable. And, you know, just because you got a platform, people write the software that they have, and they make a lot of money, people who can write programs. There is a way to segregate that out so that these children, just because their parents want them not to be home alone, and they want to participate, but they're good kids. And we're kind of like stigmatizing them before they even have a running start. So, you know, I know it's a program, but programs get written all the time. Software can be changed. So I guess, as I said, Madam Secretary, we'll put that in our report and recommendation to the Secretary. I'm not sure whoever gets it reads it, but that is a problem.
Madam Chair, DJJ has strictly refused to change. We've talked about this as it relates to promise. We talked about this over the years, and they have over the years have expressed no interest in changing, and it said that they had no interest in changing and making any adjustments to that to their JJS web. So we've gone through this. I absolutely agree with Chief Starling. I've been around for a while, and I understand, you know, prevention web. I understand that civil citation when it first, it's been a while, it's been a lot longer. They were just grouping them together, which made it difficult to determine which was civil citation, which one diversion, which is not the same thing in Broward County, and the need for it. And we were off to a good start, but it changed over the years, and it started with the Douglas Commission in particular, and those individuals who think like the chair, who said it publicly at a recorded school board meeting, they want to track these children. When you talk about these children, you're talking about primarily children who look like me. That is the stated purpose, and it, statutes changed. And the part where I'm talking about, where the children haven't committed any crime, they're just parents don't have the money to send them to play football for the Western Tigers. And so they may participate thinking that, this is something good, and they may not know that they are creating really this whole space where these children can be viewed and decisions made because they tried to do something good for their children. We're talking about two different things when we're talking about civil citation kids. We're not discussing that. I understand that clearly. We're talking about those children who are participating in programs who have nothing to do with law enforcement other than they may come by or something along those lines. So that is the part that is really unfair to families. And we've had this discussion with previous leadership, and that there has been no energy, no desire to do anything but what they're doing right now. So we've been down this road, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, there was a question, Ms. Butterfield, I'm just going to answer you directly. She seems to think that this is a law enforcement issue. DJJ is collecting the data, the information. Law enforcement lobbied the legislature to have the statute changed to have their deputies, some of who drove by colleges and don't understand what data collection is all about, rather than to go in and take a statistics class. But it made it available and open to all of them. So Deputy Do-Right, who just graduated from high school and got a position, can go into a computer and see where this child has been. And if this child has participated in a DJJ program, that already triggers in his mind that this kid is bad. And therefore, rather than to call mama or auntie or grandma to come get them or take them home as they would any light-skinned child, they make the decision to arrest. So law enforcement is using the data that DJJ is collecting. We're trying to make sure that the data that DJJ is collecting as to those children who are just receiving a service, a benefit, but they've done no delinquent act, no disciplinary matter in school, that they don't get lumped in with everybody else in that computer. And right now, the preventative platform that is being used lumps them all in, because as DJJ money is used, as I have said several times, just because it's DJJ's money, DJJ sets the parameters and the rules, and they just put everybody in the computer. And law enforcement does not know how to really interpret that, other than I see that kid's name in this computer. So therefore, ergo, this kid has done something wrong. And we're trying to avoid that because it is difficult. Law enforcement has one thing in mind, and that's to enforce the law. Okay. And if they see that, I know DeMarco, you're disagreeing, but most of your young rookies, your deputies out there, they see a name in a computer and it just triggers something that this kid must be wrong, especially if it's a Black or brown child. So we're trying to avoid that. DJJ money, I will reiterate and drop this footnote, is taxpayer money also. It comes from the taxes that are collected from us. So we're trying to avoid that. So you can't just put it on law enforcement, because they don't collect the data. They just get it. So DJJ collects the data, and DJJ can be selective in what data is released. Okay, it can be segregated out and put in a place, as Mr. Stalling said, that probation couldn't even get to certain parts of the platform. So why can't that be done with children who've done nothing? So that's the point that we're trying to make. And hopefully I've answered your question, maybe not to your satisfaction, but that is an answer. And that's how I'm thinking.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I don't purport to speak for law enforcement. So Ms. Butterfield is halfway right. So it was put in place by those very conservative sheriffs. And I don't speak for Sheriff Tony, but in this case, he was not one of those ones that was trying to get this done. This was Pinellas County, those cats that we all saw standing around the current leadership in Tallahassee. Your Grady Judge and those guys, your Brevard County Sheriff. So those individuals work to have this done, and we're making Mr. Stalin uncomfortable because, but I don't work over there. So the truth is the truth. So I'm just saying there was law enforcement that was wanting to do this, but it wasn't Broward County in this space who wanted this. But yes, it was a leader of it come out of law enforcement, i.e. the sheriff and the Sheriff's Association, but Broward County was not among those. And the training certainly is not there. You have these folk who are looking, they wouldn't know the Capilevas leaguers from the Lamplighters, from anybody else. They're just looking in, see that there's something there and determine that they're going to treat these children because they have all these entries into JJS, not knowing what the program is. So I do think that, we have to, be about the truth when we deal with this. It wasn't always like this. And the sole purpose of this, and if you check the records, I'm not making stuff up. This is what those particular sheriffs wanted. So yes, some law enforcement, but it did not come out of the request, didn't come out of Broward. And we were not in that group of folk who wanted to judge these children by what they're seeing in the system as we move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
There was a hand, Major DeMarco's hand, and the chair recognizes him, and then I'll hear from everybody, but his hand was up. Yes, Major.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate you acknowledging me. Yes, that's why we put some safety nets in place through this board and through Colonel Holmes when we do come across juveniles that we have interactions with, that there are supervisory restrictions, there are calls that we make down to the JAC to try and verify all these data points to ensure that we're not making the mistakes that you and President Ellison have spoken about. So we do have safety nets in place to ensure that we are checking those data points. I guess that's the best way to say it, to ensure that we're not erroneously mistaking a child who signed up for a DJJ program at the YMCA for someone who's on their second or third civil citation. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that is. Well, you know what? I was looking at you, but I do know that BSO has put in certain protocols. I'm very proud that BSO has taken this position, Sheriff Tony, Colonel Holmes, and yourself. But that's not every sheriff's department. The further north you go, the worse it gets in this state.
In Broward County, that's not every local police department either. No.
I agree. Right.
Can only do what we can do.
Well, thank you. Mr. Obel, your hand is up. The chair recognizes you.
Chief Starling, I got a question, because I remember when we put the information into the system, that when you close the child into the system, there's still a way to go back in and see the child is in the system. So even when they're closing the report, right? Because there's the process where you exit the child out of the services and there's a closure report. But if I recall it appropriately, that you can still see that child that was serviced in the system, even when it's technically that child's supposed to be automatically completely out of the system. Is that still the case?
Yeah, once they close out, once they've entered, so if we served over 30,000 kids in a 10-year period, yes, it's going to show, because we're still tracking the data of the numbers. So you take them out, then you can't pull a report because it's no longer there. But the answer is yes to your question. But one thing I do want to make a comment about, and I was trying to do it for several meetings. So Mr. Obel, I know you and Colonel Holmes, so when the chair mentioned about how you guys jumped into action when it comes to your community and you start doing other things, you erected opportunities for our kids in prevention without using DJJ and start serving a huge population, those kids in need. So I do want to say that I commend you. I admire that work. That is like exceptional. And I do want to commend you for the work that you do. You and Colonel Holmes is for, and again, I don't see that a lot. But you are that guy. I know I can just tell. So I believe in you, and I was not there long enough, because again, when you guys are talking about the apprenticeship, when you're talking about kids being put in certain offices for mentorship or either internships. And when we were talking about those, kids being exposed to other professionals. And so we were talking about a lot of kids in the professional arena, right? And so we would love to see more of that on the probation side, where our kids have more exposure to more positive things and more pro-social opportunities, what are we even, talking about, having something established. But again, you mentioned that you want to do more with us. So I anticipate that with Chief Bush, once you guys kind of link up, we should see more progress with some of our probation or more deep into kids, getting more of an opportunity to receive some of those interventions at the levels that we'd like for them to, other than just regular traditional sanctions and doing the same old same for our Broward County probation youth. But you guys are doing a great job in your prevention arena, so I do endorse you, encourage you to keep up what you're doing, because you're definitely on track.
So, sir, first of all, let me just say thank you, but I want to go back to a point. While I respect the ideal of intervention, and I respect the work of intervention, and I practice it myself, I do realize our prevention is the key to this work, right? We are spending more money on the back end than we are on the front end. The back end is where all the issues is happening. We can solve the back end issues if we front load the money and solve this aspect of the work that we're doing, right? So when we have kids who's participating in juvenile prevention programs from middle school age, in some cases, depending on how someone wrote their RFP and got approved for it, they may say, well, we're going to serve 7 to 21, or whatever the case may be. We're talking about a kid at the age of 7 who may just have a simple interaction with law enforcement can change the whole narrative for their future. So if we front load, I'm grateful for the leaders that I work with every day. I'm grateful for our chief public defender and our state attorney office, Mr. Pryor. I'm grateful for both Gordon and Pryor. But I also know while we try to do all this intervention work, they would much rather prefer we do it on the prevention side with our president for the NAACP. So I just think there's an opportunity, and you may be feeling like I'm beating up this matter more than anybody, but I see the impacts every day of it. And so if we can, when I speak with Secretary Hall, I speak from a position of we can do better and we should do better, right? That's the conversation we need to have. And I understand what position you're in, right? But I also respect the fact that at the end of the day, we all got to do this work together. And we need you all to buy in a little bit more than what you're doing. And I say that out of love and not out of, animosity or anything or anything as such. Because again, the impact we're having on the back end, we shouldn't have to say, forget the policies, Gordon and Harold and Madam President and Madam Chair. We need to create something for ourselves. Let me go grab some funding money and let me go call some people who can donate some dollars. We should be using those dollars for more front end work, not intervention work. So I thank you for your praise, but I just want us to be a little bit more intentional on our approach to doing the work, and I'm looking forward collectively making sure we take that attention all the way up to the policymakers so we can get this matter resolved. And I'm still waiting to see if your people want to accept the Apricot model or the SAMUS model, because again, those are two real nationally recognized softwares that have made some significant impact, and law enforcement do not have any access to it unless you give it to them.
All right. Well, look, did I overlook anybody, Mr. Weeks? Did you wish to chime in? You get them after. You don't ever get a kid that's ever been on the prevention side and no problems. You get them on the delinquent side and the felony side. So, look, this is a work in progress. We gotta solve this problem, because we're leaving out a whole sector of children that could benefit. But as Secretary Ellison has said, and I'm a member of the Divine Nine, we are very cognizant not to take DJJ money, even though it's our tax dollars also at play. And that means I have to give more money in addition to my dues and everything. So I'm writing checks for scholarships and things of that nature. I would like to see some of the tax dollars go to the kids who are abiding by the rules. They're not doing anything wrong. Okay, we want to make sure they stay out of the system. That's all we want. Mr. Weeks, and then I'll close this and we'll move on to the data collection. I do want to get to that.
Judge, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've been listening to this conversation intently. And one of the things that I'm troubled with is the way government, and this is no criticism to DJJ, this is a criticism to government as a whole, goes about prioritizing where they put their dollars. You know, for government, we have a bunch of bean counters in government. You know, they want to see every dollar be accounted for a bean. And it's easy to do that on the delinquency side because you have the act. You have the actual delinquent act to put the bean next to the dollar. But when it comes to prevention and what Mr. Obel was talking about, front loading the work, you don't always get those beans because you never see the act mature to delinquency. And that's where you have to have some bold leadership to be able to shift prioritizing government dollars and get away from that bean counting model and get to philosophical approaches that actually yield better results. We know that if you get in early, you get prevention before you start going down that road, is easier to curb the behavior. But we can't get no support for that. We can't get no dollars for that because there's no beans to count. You don't know how many children you prevent from getting deeper into the system. So we need some bold leadership, some bold ideas to prioritize front loading, figure out another way to account for the successes rather than looking at beans, and get away from building detention centers and treatment programs and rehabilitation programs, because that's all on the back end. They've already engaged in the conduct, and it's a lot more work to get the behavior to change on the back end. So I agree with Mr. Obel. I agree with Chief Starling. I agree with the conversation, but this is going to require bold leadership from a governmental standpoint that recognize that the front of the success stories happen in the front, and that's where the dollars need to go. But it's going to have to be a little bit more creative in how you account for those successes because you don't have the beans to count. So that's my position. I wanted to just put that out there for everybody to consume.
And Mr. Obel, if you could put this, add this to your committee's assignment. You asked the question about when the case is closed, that they're supposed to be out of the system. And Mr. Starley says, no, they're in there because that's the only way we can track the program and see, you know, where our money went. So maybe that's something else that we need to look at also. If the promise is that, and I'm not talking about the program, I'm just saying that if the intention was the kid does this and then the case is closed out, but their name is still in the system. And I guess, as I said, it goes back to my premise. It's DJJ's money and therefore their rules. But, you know, we got to change it.
And I will offer to the chief and his team over there at DJJ, if they want to capture the front end progress, there's ways we can capture that. And I'm more than happy to share some best practices of how those results look. And I can tell you, they'll far better outweigh the intervention side of things. So I'm more than happy to share that with the team over there at DJJ.
Excellent. Well, maybe you all can get together before our September meeting and we'll offer. I'm open to some solutions also. I have some things in my mind, but I'll wait until I hear from you guys. So thank you. I'm going to move on because we've been at this for almost an hour. Let's talk about the disciplinary. I know Secretary Ellison, I heard your report the last time. But has there been any movement, any progress, anything from Mr. Licata as to how they're going to treat promise and the other matrix issues?
There has been movement, but I wouldn't call it progress. I'd call it the opposite of that. So I'm told that there will be the will is to get rid of promise altogether, to go back to the old model where they remove a child from their home school, that they put them out and out of school, alternative to out of school suspension, AOS. What that means is they remove them from their home school. They put them in the kids call it the bad kid school. They receive some busy work, has nothing to do with their current assignments. District has no method to get the actual classwork, even though they claim they do. If you talk to staff, they'll admittedly tell you they have no way of getting their classroom assignments, their real classroom assignments to those children. And so they will be not learning, they'll be behind in their work, assuming that they even send it at all. And we will return to, in the absence of promise comes school-based arrest. You will see that we will quickly return to the worst in the state of Florida. It'll be Black and Latino children again. You will see that the grades, the graduation rate will fall because education is directly tied to criminal justice / juvenile justice. So at their meeting, they will the decision has been made, the vote simply hasn't been taken, to return to the old days of really punishing, pushing out, and they become part of what we call the disappeared, where, you start out ninth grade with, 1,000 children and you end up with 200, and the disappeared means nobody knows where they are. So the bad news is that we will be returning to that. And so I have reached out to our council. We will certainly go and attempt to make the case. But I'm told that their minds are made up. And so just as we did before with working with our partners in litigation, we will be looking to do the same thing with LDF and the others. We are headed in a very bad direction, back to where we were. And so, they were presenting, Ms. Fudge was presenting it as it was a new idea. Alternative to out of school suspension sounds like something that might be good. It just means that they're moving from homeschool, house them, don't teach them anything. And then they come back, they're behind. And there are plenty of studies that show if a kid misses, X amount of assignments, they are not going to graduate and all will not be well. Nothing will account for. And that, I remind you, district likes to say that, they are going to take into account children who have special needs. Well, there are plenty of families who would beg to differ. That is not a thing. Suspend, socially promote if possible, and then remove. So nothing but bad news. As the NAACP, I have never advocated for anything other than good quality, highest quality free education as we are promised in our Constitution. However, I can tell you that I can't see anything good happening with the district in Broward County as we move forward. So I'm at this space where I don't know that I would be able to continue to encourage us to send our children where they don't really care about our children who are on the east side. Children out west gonna be okay because their promise system is already in place. And so if you talk to any teachers offline who are out west, they could tell you that there's not a drug that you can mention that doesn't appear there, that the behavior is out of control and so on and so forth. But it's okay because their parents are somebody that they care about and they go home. So they have their own promise system, their own civil citation off the books But that's not what happens to our children. So we are, when the vote happens, led by folk that look like me, you will see the clock turn back under the guise of we're hurting the children with civil citation, having to enter it. And, they still, it's a policy that the district has that is requiring them to do that, not statute. It is their policy. And they have continued to move in the direction. And I believe the current administration has directed his appointees to get rid of promise. And come hell or high water, that's what's is going to happen. And with no concern about what's going to happen to children, particularly Black and Latino children. So it's punish, push out. NAACP published a report, several actually. So the school to prison pipeline is alive and well. And so we're gonna go back to the argument where they're blaming the district will say, well, we don't arrest any children, it's the police. And the police are saying, well, you're calling me to the scene and many times asking the officer to arrest the children. And there are some law enforcement officers who have actually refused. And sometimes when the refusal happened, a call went into their chief or to their supervisor saying that, we told them to arrest the children, they didn't. We do know some officers got into trouble because they need to remember that they don't work for the district, they work for their own department. So nothing good is going to happen in Broward County schools based on where they are going right now. The state attorney's office has made an appeal, public defender's office has made an appeal, we've made an appeal, other folk have gone, but the direction to move away, and nothing will replace promise. They said, well, we'll take those services to from the promise site to the other. That's not what they do. And if you've been around and been involved with the district, and I know Mr. Walters has, out of school a suspension, alternative to it is nothing. The disciplinary matrix has gone back to where it was prior to Mr. Runcie. And so we have nothing but bad news to report. I believe, and I did reach out to Dr. Licata regarding setting up an appointment, and he indicated that he was looking forward to working with us post-promise, basically, as we move forward. So nothing takes its place. There will be no services. I know, as I mentioned last month, Fort Lauderdale said that they will, with their shots fired program, will, if it's in and around a school, and there are several, and particularly in Fort Lauderdale, that they'd be willing to say to the school, there was a shooting and this happened. Maybe the children may act out because this has happened because of trauma, because, always just, the ambulance goes away, but the trauma stays. But that's just one chief, or who knows how this program is going to be implemented. They don't even have the most of the schools. It's just really, really, it just pisses me off to no end, Judge, that Broward County just doesn't really care about, this board doesn't really care about our children. And watch, they'll have all the excuses and they sound really great, pretending like they care, but never mind what they say. Let's watch what they do. So the children of Broward County who attend public schools are in very big trouble.
Any questions of Secretary Ellison? Mr. Weeks, the chair recognizes you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam President, NAACP. I concur 100% with your remarks. I too am very concerned and am trying to make sure that everybody recognizes there's a deep cloud that is hovering over our children in school starting next year. We're going to look back at the data after next year's school year and the years thereafter And we're going to start seeing a different trend when it comes to arrest, suspension, expulsions from Broward County schools. We're going to start to see a different trend when it comes to graduation rates, when it comes to Broward County schools, to Black male achievement in Broward County schools. And that's an unfortunate reality, because if you undermine the programming that was in place to shore up disparities that occur within our system, to make sure there's some equity in the way children are treated throughout this community, then we are going to go right back to what was happening before those programmings were put in place. And what was happening before those programmings was graduation rates for schools were down, Black male achievement was down, arrest, suspension, expulsions for Black and Latinos was through the roof. So that's what we know the data shows. We are historians. We have seen this before, and we're warning and we're trying to ring the bell of alarm that this is not the course of action to take. You cannot remove all the supports around children and expect them to excel. You're going to lean on law enforcement, and arrests are going to go through the roof. Suspensions through the roof, expulsions through the roof. Back to the point of culling children out of the school system. When Madam President talks about the forgotten, there was a time where there would be a whole group of children that nobody knew where they were. They weren't in school, they weren't in the community, but I can tell you, law enforcement knew who they were. Burglaries were up in neighborhoods throughout the day. We knew that you had to deal with children's issues and make sure that they were in school. That's where a child needs to be throughout the day, in school. But, through the infinite wisdom of all of the committees that have been set up, the infinite wisdom of, some recommendations from some committees, and the infinite wisdom of the leadership changes that have happened in Broward County school system, you've had 3 superintendents in a matter of course of a few years. We have a whole board that a large majority of them were not elected but appointed. And this is the direction that we're going, to remove all the safety and supports around children and go back to the old way of doing things, just arresting them, suspending them, expending them, get them out. Let's just call out a whole section of our children and throw them away back into the community. So I do not like to see the direction that we're going. I did not like the process that they took in even raising Promise and having a conversation about Promise, because they did not even reach out to all of the people that are still here and present, that know how this thing happened and know where it came from, to even get any advice or direction on whether that's the appropriate way to go. So they're making decisions in the blind, without any history, without any data points, just based on whatever the wind blows. And today the wind may be red. Tomorrow it may be blue. It may be. But we have to make sound decisions behind our children. And I'm not very confident on what I'm seeing, because the data will speak. This is a data-driven board, and we're gonna go look at the data and compare it to years past. And I'm very, very much afraid that data is going to mean that I'm going to have a much larger number of children I got to represent in juvenile court because they're being arrested out of school systems. So thank you for your vigilance, Madam President. Thank you for keeping this at the forefront of this committee, Madam Chair. And we wish you were still there, Dr. Osgood.
I know she ain't wishing for that.
Madam Chair, now that the senator has joined us, we have quorum.
We now have a quorum. So real quick, let me go back. At this time, we've introduced ourselves. So Senator Osgood, if I can just get you, we have onlookers, people in the audience, the virtual audience. So we all introduce ourselves. And Yolanda Brown, were you on to introduce yourself? Okay, well, Senator Osgood, then Ms.
No,
Brown.
I was not.
Okay, Senator Osgood, if you just introduce yourself to the members of the community.
Thank you, Judge Holmes. I am Senator Rosalind Osgood, the senator for Florida's 32nd District and a member of the State Senate Pre-K to 12 Education Committee.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Honorable Judge Holmes. I am Yolanda Brown. I'm with Broward County Court Administrator's Office. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. All right. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, move
Yes, yes.
approval of the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
So second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, speak now, forever hold your peace.
All the question, Madam Chair.
Oh, okay, the chair recognizes the secretary, and we have been asked to call the question. All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, please signify by raising your hand or say aye. Mr. Walters, if you say aye. Do I have you, Mr. Walters? Did you drop me? Is he still on, Madam
Probably having audio
Secretary?
problems.
Okay, all right. All right. Well, even without his vote, the motion will carry. The agenda has been approved and we'll follow it as is. At this time, I'll also entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the July meeting, July 12th, 2023. Is there a motion?
Approved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Well, you know what? I'm doing parliamentary things for my sorority. So moved, and it's not really a motion. So if I can have Mr. Walters, you to state what you're moving us to do. It would be, the sorority members are looking at this meeting. They want to make sure I'm telling them, telling you all what I'm telling them. So if you restate the motion, Mr. Walters.
Madam Chair, I move the approval of the minutes from July 12th.
Right.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right. Hearing no discussion, is there a motion to call the question? Okay. All right. Mr. Weeks, you moving to call to vote? Okay, yes, good. Can we do that unanimously and just all in favor of the motion? I'm just trying to move us along because we got a lot of.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Any nays? Any abstentions? Hearing nothing, the motion carries, and the approval of the minutes from July 12th have been made. And I do need to do a point of a privilege, well, not privilege, but just a point of order. At the July 12th meeting, the minutes from June were adopted. However, we had no quorum in June, so we turned that into a workshop. So anybody questioning that, that's what happened. We lacked a quorum, but we went all through the agenda, and getting it as a workshop. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, we are now, I guess I need to go over the norms real quick. Everybody's been following them, but since we have a quorum, I have to state it for the record. I'm going to ask that you put your cell phones on vibrate or turn them off. Raise your hand to be recognized. The chair has to recognize you in order for you to have the floor. I'm going to ask that you speak for a maximum of 3 minutes, unless you are actually giving the report itself. It takes a little bit more time for that, but if you're just speaking on an item, try to limit it because other people may want to speak on the same item. Please respect all the opinions and viewpoints of people here or on the Zoom, even if you disagree with them. Just try to let's be civil. We're doing better than Tallahassee at times, so we'll do it this way. And then please address all board members respectfully. I'm really going to try to do that with Mr. Dallas Cowboys Obel. So I'm really going to try to be respectful to him. Were there any questions with regard to Secretary Ellison's school disciplinary? It's a grim report, but it's necessary for us to hear that. And I kind of think yes, Mr. Walters.
Yes, just a comment, and I hope I can do it in 3 minutes. But this moving back was, even though being on this committee, we look mainly at our children, but it's no different from what is happening to us as grown folks. We are also being moved back. Well, no, y'all are being moved backwards. I didn't do well back there before, and I'm not going back because now I got old and decrepit, and I can't afford to do what I used to do when I was young and vibrant. So I'm not going back. Let that be clear. And I just want to say to you and the Madam Chair and others that's listening, this is not something that is happenstance. This is well planned out. Those people that's on that board and people that's in Tallahassee have a set thing to cause Broward County education system to fail. As Madam Secretary said, she talked about the 1,200 kids that was in 9th grade and the 200 that graduate. They don't mention that number. What they will tell you is 88% of the 12th graders graduated, not mention the fact that 90% of the ones that was in 9th grade have now left the school system. I asked the question of the school system a while back. Why is it that we have those 1,200 in 9th grade and graduate 160 at the end of the 12th grade? They say, well, people move away. Well, I don't understand how people move away if Broward County is a growing county. To me, that means people are coming here, not moving away. And if one person move away, 2 people came to replace them. And I just hope that we as a board and we as people that care about children, and I know all of you do, we have a job to do. And we should not leave our positions, volunteer or paid, unless we train some young person to take our place to carry on this fight. I don't know about y'all, but I'm getting older, and I'm not complaining about that because the alternative is not well with me. But we need to have that continuum of momentum. Our children have to know what to do, when to do, and how to do, or we're going to be in real serious trouble. It was a long and drudging trip up the front side of the mountain. Down the back side will be swift. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walters.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I
Chair recognizes the secretary.
Thank you. I just think it would be appropriate to hear from now Senator, then school board member. I mean, from the day she came in, she worked with us, the community, not just NAACP, but anybody who would work with her to do what was right and just for our children, in particular Promise and the school to prison pipeline. So I would just like to have a comment from Senator Osgood regarding where we are headed with Broward County Schools, if you would.
Senator Osgood, you wish to be recognized by the chair to speak on that issue?
Thank you, Judge Holmes. You know, Mr. Walters is correct. This is a big issue because when you put HB7 in place and you start messing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, what you do is you shut down portals for data. We know that government have to respond to data and read data to make decisions. So when you stop being intentional about the data, which we were under Mr. Runcie's administration, we were very transparent about the gaps in Black male achievement, about the district arresting kids in school. And we had a collaborative effort from the community, this group, other groups, Blacks, whites, it was a whole, all hands on deck to make sure that Broward didn't continue to arrest more kids in school than any other county. But these games continue to be played. Once you start recording promise and giving civil citations, that's not the purpose of promise, as we know. Once we move away from prevention to intervention, then we're responding too late to address the needs of our students. So a lot of these laws come in place and it set us up for these games to be played. So our children are being attacked from a behavior perspective. They're being attacked from the curriculum. This whole battle about African-American history is because in 1996, Congresswoman Wilson and a group got Jeb Bush to fund an African-American task force that infused African-American history across the curriculum, social studies, history, and math. So that's why you continue to see these different attacks. Pay attention to now how a test other than the ACT or SAT is being allowed to clear kids for college, this CSL test that's all shaped and done by conservatives. And we know, let's just go back to the basics. Why would you have a rule in slavery that Black people would lose their lives if they learned to read and write? If they were exposed to information that allowed them to think critically, thinking critically generates a human response from you to stand up against something that's going against what's in your spirit. So as a man or woman thinketh in their heart, so is he or she. If you don't allow me to have exposure to information, to have critical discussions about history and curriculum, then my heart is not attached to it. This is an all-out attack on our kids. So I have a few suggestions. We have to do little steps and we have to do them at multiple times. We have to continue to agitate and push back. We have to make sure that whatever platforms we have, we're teaching our history. We're pushing the issue about Black history, because what they'll say is we want them to do the work for us. You know, they can be very offensive and very egregious in their comments and conversations. So we have to refute what they're saying when they come out with crazy curriculum stuff that say Black people benefited from slavery, or that slavery increased by natural reproduction, when we know that Black women and men was forced to breed babies. Nobody's talking about that because it mainly impacts the Black woman, and people just have a tendency to get quiet about Black women. We have to continue to raise the issue about how Black girls are treated in school in a disproportionate way. As Mr. Walters said, we have a lot of work to do. We have to pick the part that we as a group are going to champion and we as individuals. So we're dealing with outside the veil. And in closing, the other issue you deal with when you're working in the education space is you got to deal with us inside the veil. You always got one or two people that go in to push their personal interests or agenda. They want to get a contract. They want to get in. It's all about them. They want to be the one to speak for the Black community. Have no power, no influence, just selfish and self-centered, narcissistic, thinking about themselves, making money and doing egregious deal cuttings and misrepresentation of the community on the back of our kids. And this is the consequences that we get. AP courses, it's hurting our children. Now teachers are being forced with this AP psychology course. If you remove sexual orientation and gender identity, the course doesn't meet the standards, so the child doesn't get the credit. If you teach gender identity and sexual orientation, you lose your teaching license. So now we're going to have less representation as far as Black and Latino teachers in this field, because people don't want to go to jail. They don't want to be embarrassed. So this is an all-out attack on Black people from a policy structure level, Judge Holmes, and you know, once they put it in law, is then how they come back and get away with it. So I agree with Dr. Carol Anderson that the biggest place we see white rage is in public policy. And to say inside the veil, brothers and sisters, you have to vote. You have to get everyone you know to vote. At the end of the day, that vote is our greatest power. If we show up to the polls and vote, we will not have the consequences we have today. You don't get to say you upset about something, so you're not going to vote. That's the coward way out of it. We have to turn out to the polls, and we got to stand in line all day, all night, whatever it takes, because people died. People like Mr. Walters spent countless hours, gave up a lot of sacrifices for us to have these opportunities. And we cannot let our ancestors live and be in vain. We will be just as disrespectful to them not to fight as they're being to them when they say that they benefited from slavery, that slavery increased by natural reproduction, and that Black people was violent upon themselves in the Ocoee, Rosewood, and Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre. Just straight lies. There is a group of teachers that is challenging the standards because they say to teach lies goes against the code of ethics. So I'm saying that to Judge Holmes, the NAACP. Maybe that's something for attorneys to look at and chase. I do have some other ideas for lawsuits that I won't release on here because we know that everybody watch what we do. So everything in my mind is not public record. So I'm not going to reveal a strategy that I think can get us moving forward. But please, let's continue to fight for our kids. They're our most precious commodity. Every kid is a blessing from God. And we have a moral obligation to make sure that as they have a need to grow every day, that we're creating that opportunity and that need for them to grow.
Thank you, Dr. Osgood. Anyone else wish to speak about the dire situation? The more things change, the more they stay the same. And if we don't know our history, these folks want to repeat, but I search my family tree. No real benefits on my side of the family from being beaten and lynched. And so Florida has to change. But Florida is losing revenues. They're losing a lot of money because there are folks that say, we're not coming here. There are parents who are packing up and leaving, taking their children with them because they feel that this is not a safe place to raise their children. Florida has turned into sort of like a muck and mire, as we used to say in church in the old days. So I pray for this state because I love this state. I own real estate in this state. I'm not trying to sell it, but I want to stay here and fight and make sure that our children get educated, because that's the only way you're going to defeat anything that comes against you is to get that knowledge. But that's why they're so apt to put our children out of school, that they don't get the education. And while I applaud churches and fraternities and sororities saying, well, we'll teach our children. Well, they're getting our money. I'm a follow the money woman. Our taxes, okay, and I pay a lot of taxes. I'm a bit salty about the taxes that I pay, even in retirement. So if they're gonna get our money and we're paying school board members, they need to listen to the parents. That's what the parental rights bill was all about, but they only listen to one set of parents as opposed to all the parents. So if you are a parent and you have a child in school, speak up. I'll back you up. I have no problems. I'm set. I don't have to beg, borrow, steal, no money. I'm good. So no further questions of Madam Secretary. Any questions? If not, I'd like to move on and try to get as much done. I understand that some data was released last month. I was perturbed. I was perturbed in June, and then I hear that you all got some data. So, Mr. Weeks, I'm turning the floor over to you for the report on the data work group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask that you bring over John James and Gloria
Johnny's coming over now.
is not with us.
Ms. Gaynor, I think, is on that
Ms.
committee
Gaynor
also.
as well. And I'm going to ask Madam Chair to allow me to defer to Mr. James and Ms. Gaynor to lead this conversation, this discussion.
So I got to recognize Mr. James. Okay. Hey, Mr. James, how you doing? The chair recognizes you. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Judge, Madam Chair. So I'm waiting on Ms. Gaynor. Ms. Gaynor and I kind of had an opportunity to peruse the numbers. We got them on Monday, so we really hadn't had a chance to really get a deep dive in it. So unfortunately, I gotta be quite candid with you. I need a little bit more time to break it down the way that I like to break it down. This ain't enough time for me to do my.
Can you all give us like an overview? Because I know you got the data dump, as I call it, on Monday. But if you can give us an overview, tell us where you're going, because I'll give you as much time during the September meeting as you need to tell us what you got.
Sure. What I want to say, I want to take this time to also to ask, I think Ms. Butterfield may still be on. I know I saw that she may have been on here earlier. We were missing some information. She had promised us that she was going to help us get the zip code information as to where the crimes were occurring, because we wanted to look at that and to see how that may have some type of correlation to arrest for certain juveniles. I'm still looking for that information. We'll still need that information for us to be able to take a look into that. And maybe Chief Starling, maybe you can help us with that, with let Ms. Butterfield know that we need that information. Is that possible?
Yeah, she's on bringing her in unless
Okay.
she's there and not there officially, but certainly I received the request here. Oh, there she go.
She's here.
Beautiful. So yes, Ms. Butterfield, if you can give us that one more caveat that we asked for, so that way we can look at this a little bit more. I'll greatly appreciate that.
My recollection from that conversation was that we were going to focus more on the law enforcement who cover the zip codes, because we could get the zip code data. We do have it and I can provide it. But when we were talking about how, if kids were arrested in certain zip codes, it was kind of the law enforcement policy and practices that would be influenced by that. So if we looked at the law enforcement agency that did not provide that I thought that was covering that, but that is my mistake. I can go ahead and provide that zip code data. And just for clarity, it's of where the offense occurred, not where the youth resides, correct?
Yes.
Okay, not a problem.
And then I think the other thing that we also requested, and I didn't see it, Ms. Gaynor, you can tell me if you saw it, was that you were going to provide us information regarding how you were getting your source population, or the statistics regarding population, because that was something that was driving some of your numbers as well. So we wanted to get that information. Am I right, Ms. Gaynor, on that?
That's correct. I do have that. Let me that information right now.
And if it is the wish of the board, we were able to, like Mr. James said, to look over what we did receive. So we were able to get the information regarding the missed opportunities, specifically relating to assault and battery, and some data on law enforcement. So if we want to go over that, then we're prepared to do that as well.
Give us as much as you can. We got less than 30 minutes left in this meeting, so that's why I'm just going to ask for an overview, and then we'll take a deep dive. And if you all are going to generate a written report, I would really love that, like at least a week before our next meeting in September, so I can disseminate it to the board, so they'll know what you're looking at and formulate their questions to you. So. It was kind of hard hearing and then coming up with questions. All right, give us an overview, and then we'll do the deep dive the next meeting. I'm gonna give you as much time as I possibly can to get this information.
Okay, I'll do it as quickly as possible. We were provided data with the time period between March 2022 through February of 2023. During that time, there were 204 missed opportunities. specifically relating to 204 missed opportunities for that period. In that period, the 204, there were 157 community-based referrals. There were 47 school-related referrals. In that 204, there were 108 which were related to domestic violence, and there were 96 that were non-domestic violence assault and batteries for first-time misdemeanors. When we look at the youth who were arrested for assault and battery, there were a total of, let me see. When we look at the youth that were related to assault and battery, there were 57. There were 57 that were non-domestic violence related. So that means we had 108 that were domestic violence, 96 that were non-domestic violence, and then there were 57 that were assault and batteries that had no connection to DV. And of those 57, we were able to look at them and see that there were 35 times when these youth who were arrested for non-domestic violence related assault and battery, there was no reason available or a reason provided by law enforcement. And it's worded like that in the system, but I do want to make it clear that that's just a system drop down. So if the law enforcement maybe didn't verbally tell the person at the jack that this is the reason we arrested the youth instead of giving civil citation, or if the person who entered it at the jack did not look at the offense report and make a determination, they probably just put that there was nothing given. So 57 youth who were arrested for the assault and battery for a first-time misdemeanor, there were no reason. There were 35 who there were no reasons given. Yeah, I'm cleaning this up. So 57 were arrested, first time assault and battery, not connected to domestic violence. And 35 times out of that 57, there was no reason given. And the no reason given, again, does not mean that law enforcement did not, it doesn't mean necessarily that law enforcement didn't provide it. It doesn't mean that it wasn't in the offense report. It just means that that was a drop down that was selected in the system at the time. So we were working on collecting the reasons why law enforcement wouldn't issue for eligible offenses. But what we're seeing is that more times than not, the majority of the cases, that reason is being selected. So we don't know what the reasons are. And Ms. Butterfield did provide us a little bit more data, and she was able to give us other reasons why someone would have been arrested if they were eligible. And they would include things like the parent declined. And I think for the parent decline, we maybe had like 2. It would include things like a other reason, which I'm not sure what that is, or it was an ineligible offense according to local policy. So we would have to dive deeper into that, because although ineligible offense type by local policy is spelled out in the actual data, we can also see that the things that would disqualify a youth, like it was weapon related or it was DV related, is also included in the data. So we would have to look a little bit deeper into that. And I know that there were a couple of times that when I looked at it, that the victim requested formal processing, which I know for our program with adult, that's a requirement, but it's not necessarily a requirement for juvenile. That's not something that would prevent them from being issued a civil citation. So we have to look a little bit more closely at the reasons we do have for youth not being issued a citation, but we also need to find out the reason why, when youth are arrested instead of being issued a civil citation, that we're not being provided with a reason. Because if we know those reasons, then we can try to problem solve and make recommendations. But if the default is always going to be, or the majority of the time going to be, there was no reason available, that doesn't give us really much wiggle room to make recommendations in relation to that. And then also, I was able to kind of look at the school-based arrest to try to see, is there some kind, just based on this very limited time frame of data, if there are any outliers as far as what schools the citations are coming from. And when we look at the citations that we have, the majority of them, not majority, the school with the highest number of citations issuance came from Coconut Creek High School. And then there was Margate Middle School, there was Everglades High School, and then Lions Creek Middle School, which I expected to see Lions Creek if I saw Coconut Creek High School. So we were able to see that, and Ms. Butterfield provided us with the civil citation utilization rate based on the utilization rate based on the race and ethnicity groups, and 62.7% of Black youth who were eligible for civil citation, whether or not they were issued or not, 62% of the time, or 62.7% of the time, they were issued a civil citation. And for white youth, it was 56.5% of the time, Hispanic youth, 75.2% of the time. But to be clear, that's only when you look at it by race or ethnic group. When you look at the overall utilization, or the overall 204 youth who were not issued civil citations, 65% of those youth were Black. And the majority of them were male.
Mr. James, anything further before I open the floor up for questions? They are going to be questions, but I'd like to kind of see if we could get something written from your committee, Mr. Weeks.
Just two things that I want to point out. I think that
Yes.
the data that we receive is telling about something major. When you look at the utilization, the rate, you had Broward Sheriff Office at 70%, and then you had Fort Lauderdale Police Department at 75%. That means that they're leading the way with law enforcement agencies in the county with actually utilizing civil citation, right? And I look at it and I say there's got to be a correlation, a nexus between the fact that they sit on this board and participate in these conversations as to how effectively they're using something that this board was very active with putting together. And then I look at the other departments that their utilization rate is extremely low. For example, which you'll continue to see throughout the numbers, that Coconut Creek leads the way with not utilizing civil citation and also arresting more children for non-domestic violence type offenses. And it's alarming that you can have one jurisdiction in this county that just simply doesn't want to assist and help the kids the way that which we're looking to help. So then it says that if we are busing children from Pompano over to Coconut Creek to go to school, then the mistakes they make in Pompano may be treated one way by BSO, but the mistakes they make in Coconut Creek will be definitely treated another way by the Coconut Creek Police Department. That's alarming. That's scary for me, because then now it's busing the thing that we want to do for our children when we can see how that can be a bad thing for them. So there are other numbers, there's other data that we need to continue to look at to just kind of, I guess, draw the nexus of see a correlation, but some of this stuff is scary, if you ask me.
All right. Any questions of Ms. Gaynor or Mr. James?
Madam Chair.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Walters, the chair recognizes you, and then Mr. Weeks, you can speak following him.
First, I want to thank the committee for the information. And when I reviewed this information, when it was sent to me, by the way, somebody cared a lot for me and said here, and I studied it, and I wondered if Madam Secretary remember when we were dealing with schoolhouse, the jailhouse, prison, the pipeline. We had someone representing the Chiefs organization with us, so that whatever we talked about, we had a link to the chiefs of police so that they can take this information back. Perhaps if we try to get someone from the Chiefs Association to represent them on this board, perhaps we wouldn't have that trouble in Coconut Creek, and Coral Spring was another. You didn't mention Coral Spring, but that was another one that don't really care to issue civil citations. Maybe I was going a little too far by saying don't care, but that's the indication to me. When you got an opportunity and you don't use it, you don't care enough to. But I think that would help us a bit if we had direct connection to that Chiefs Association, so that when we talk about these things, they're here to hear it firsthand. And we do that, and I really like the way they put the report out, and I'm certainly going to be waiting to hear what happened in September when you give them more time.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Madam
Yeah,
Secretary.
the Chiefs Association is dead end. If you ever been to one of those meetings, it's the bravado and it's all of this, and the Chiefs Association doesn't really speak for the individual police departments. The idea would be to work with the individual chiefs in order to get this done. You have Creek, who really does not care. They show up on a state report every single year of leading, school-based arrests. They know it's Black children. They're good with it, and apparently their elected officials are as well. There may be opportunity for Sunrise Plantation because they're getting new chiefs there. But I think the thing would be to work with the individual chiefs. We do have some other new ones. I know we have Moss down south there. But the thing would be to get to be in communication and meet with the whoever is the top of the food chain. Like we met with Sheriff Tony and asked for a top decision maker. And that's how we ended up with Colonel Holmes. The chief over at Fort Lauderdale assigned us the major London. And so just having Officer Friendly come doesn't get us where we want to go. We've had some chiefs who they're good. Sunrise has been good with what they're doing. Hollywood is good at what they're doing. So the Coconut Creek even blew off the state attorney, if truth be told. They're not listening. Coral Springs is not listening. And so the issue has to be worked through the city individual, either whether the former government is their officials. Because you recall, Lauderhill chief decided that she was going to pull Lauderhill out of Promise. But fortunately for us, unfortunately for her, she got some bad advice and she was not able to do that because once the commission acted on it, then she was no longer in charge of doing that. So it is, a lot of they're top-down organizations. So get to the chief, work with him. If that doesn't work, perhaps the leadership in his or her city to make a difference. But that's some of those people. Creek, everybody knows that. The DOJ knows that. The state of Florida knows that. Our former Chief Evans used to. We've talked about this year after year. The Creek is always on there. So it's going to be us to do something different. But bringing them on, it is very disruptive, and they got a million reasons why they're going to continue on. We've had good fortune with Fort Lauderdale and with BSO. We started there and we continue to work through them. The other was individuals gonna have to be some individual conversations with those guys.
You know, I'm looking at, while I was listening, I was also revisiting 985.12. And, you know, we discussed this when we came up with the circuit plan. We got the chief judge involved, and so there is an administrative order with regard to civil citations in Broward County. However, the statute does say that the state attorney runs the civil citation program. Even though he had memorandums of understanding from the Office of the Public Defender and the clerk's office and an administrative order by the chief judge, it is still the burden of the state attorney's office to get with these municipalities that are not following the civil citation plan. The legislature says that, you know, the counties should come up with a plan. Even though Dr. Osgood, that this may be a time to revisit that statute to give it a little bit more teeth. I don't know how y'all going to accomplish that, but Philippians 4:13 is a good starting place because the legislature doesn't mandate, it just says we encourage the promulgation of civil citation plans. So, you know, if they really want to help the children, they all campaign and get elected saying, we're going to help the children. They play the Whitney Houston song and the children are our future. And then they turn the light bulbs out on the children and just, you know, say law enforcement have at them, put them in jail so that they can, you know, we can keep the 13th Amendment going strong. Slavery was abolished, except for people who are in prison under servitude. So I don't think we'll get a constitution, a U.S. constitutional amendment to just say slavery is abolished. That's why these folks are thinking that there's benefits, but there's a lot going on, but we need our partners to help us. You know, the law enforcement agencies, you know, the two, I call them the two C's, Coconut Creek and Coral Springs, they always do what they want to do, especially with our children. And it's got to stop eventually. I think Colonel Holmes does a good job of going to the meetings and you know, trying to parlay and make nice and tell them, you know, what to do and you know, and follow BSO, because this is what we do. But you know, these people they, you know, they do what they want to do, but that's a subject for another day because we are running very slow on time, close on time. So I want to thank Mr. James and certainly Ms. Gaynor for putting that together. Ms. Butterfield, keep the stats coming, keep the data coming, and we really appreciate that. And Mr. Weeks, any final, because we got 10 minutes left.
Yes, Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank Mr. James and Ms. Gaynor and all the other members that participated in the committee, the data dive. But I recall that there was it wasn't a PowerPoint, but it was a PDF that had some data points in it. Was that available, Ms. Butterworth?
Butterfield.
Let's try that, Ms. Butterfield.
Ms. Butterfield, that was your first presentation when you presented to the board. You had charts and graphs. You had gender breakdowns.
So we have that initial high-level data presentation. We have the first one from the data subcommittee, which is a PDF with some data points in it, and then this most recent one.
Okay, I'm going to ask that the committee, while they continue their work to review the data, the most recent bit of data, that we also try to incorporate a similar type presentation of graphs, so we can present that to the board in a written form, and we can have that as a point that we can refer to back when we move on in the future. I want to have some baselines for us to be able to monitor moving forward. Thank you.
And if you're going to do PowerPoint, please follow the rules of PowerPoint. No, a minimum of 32-point font, Arial or Times Rover, so I can see. See, I'm putting on these fancy glasses, so I'm just telling you. I teach, so you know, I follow the rules. Look, let me move along. I think the civil citation and juvenile domestic violence report will encompass in the data presentation. All right. So is there anybody that's not clear on that? We did touch upon it, but we're going to get our hands on some documents so that we can look at it and ask questions. Please, committee, don't forget about the gender breakdown too. I want to know where the girls or the young women are falling on this spectrum. Let's go to the find out how many youth are currently in the detention centers as well as in BSO. Major DeMarco, I'll start with you because Mr. Stalling is going to give me the breakdown for the detention center. But how many youth are in BSO jail? Normally in Paul Ryan, is that correct?
Yes, we presently have 11.
Okay. Didn't you have 11 last month? Yeah. I guess they're not moving.
Some move in, some move out, maybe.
All right. How many of them are male or female?
It looks like they are all male
Okay.
based on their names and what it says for sex.
Okay. All
I
right.
have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 black males and 3 that are identifying as white males.
Okay. All right, and I'll ask the Madam Secretary's questions, all that she has, COVID protocols being, and COVID is on the rise. I will tell you all that COVID is on the rise, and there will be a new vaccine out in September. So
It says on the notes here that COVID safety protocols are being utilized on a regular basis.
excellent. And what about education?
They all received their education for this month. They all received their medical attention for this month as well. And there have been no injuries reported this month.
Excellent. Any questions of Major DeMarco? Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. That was real nice and concise. All right. Chief Stalling, who you got in the detention center?
As of today's date, we have 54. Out of the 54, we have 51 males and obviously 3 females. All 3 females are Black females, and of the 51 males, 10 are identified as white.
Still got that disproportionality here. Okay. COVID protocols in place?
Standard, yes. We have obviously full medical staff there, and we just have our standard daily protocols and ensuring that each kid is seen, they're healthy, they are, obviously have to be seen by our nurses that are there upon injury.
Right, and education?
Education will be standard. We have the alternative education department, so that's always going to be a concern, no matter how you spend it. But we're coming off the summer here in Broward. Obviously we got a few more weeks. But they're in their summer mode.
Okay. All right. Questions of Major DeMarco or Chief Stalling? All right, we're gonna move on.
I got one quick question. Chief Starling, I had a meeting with the superintendent over there last week. He told me he was gonna be on this meeting today. Did you get him the information so you could attend?
Oh, I have not been in communication, so I'm filling in for Chief Bush today.
Oh,
One
okay.
additional thing I do want to add, we do have like 20 kids that are post-disposition, but not all 20 are at JDC as far as those that are committed pending placement. But there are only 8 kids that are in Broward detention that are actually post-disposition that are committed pending placement. There are a total of 16 that are available, but there are another 8 that we have between Dade County and then I have some here in Palm Beach County. So just wanted to share that as well. So there's 16 kids waiting for a commitment program, 8 are out of the county and 8 are in the county.
Yeah, that was Mr. Weeks's question about who are we housing in our facilities that make our numbers look bad.
Yeah, like I said, I have 4 Broward's here, so actually, and then obviously kids are transitional. We have another 4 down in Miami-Dade detention. But again, you have co-defendants and you have victims. So we do interchange our kids between the 3 JDCs for safety reasons. And the kids are moving for court purposes as well.
Right. Can I entertain a motion to be made to extend for 5 minutes so I can get the rest of this agenda covered? Mr. Weeks, the chair recognizes you. You have a motion.
Yes, I move that we extend the 5 minutes so we can finish the agenda.
Okay.
Second,
He moves that we extend 5 minutes. Was there a second? Was that Secretary Ellison?
yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Been seconded. Can I get, unanimous consent on this one? This is one of
Aye.
those. Okay, great. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, we will stop, Madam President, at 5:02. All right, any updates on I know we were in the budget. Have you been invited to the blueprint planning and Mr. Weeks? Tell me what's going on. Just because we're in the budget doesn't mean nothing if they're not moving with blueprints and the sites and shovels.
We have not had any further conversation on moving the detention center issue further. I'm sure that conversation will start picking up as we move closer to committee week or committee time. That's going to be coming up in a latter part of this year. I do not have any further reports on that. I will circle back with the Department of Juvenile Justice and get a timeline on when we're going to start having those conversations. I do want to report one other issue. There is a circuit consolidation issue that has come to the attention of everyone throughout the state of Florida. It not only impacts juveniles, but it impacts the entire court system, the civil side and the criminal side.
They want to combine. So what that means is the Supreme Court, at the behest of the legislature, believe it or not, it came from Paul Renner. The guy threw out he used to be appear before me. He was the Speaker of the House. He put a mandate to the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court to see, we have 20 judicial circuits in this state. They just expanded the appellate courts. We now have a 6th District Court of Appeal. But now they want to condense, and I think I got an idea what they want to do, so they don't have that many state attorneys that are in opposition, or public defenders who don't toe the line. So they start combining judicial circuits. I really don't think that they can do that with Broward, because Broward is already 4 counties. Under the auspices of the 4th District Court of Appeal. I don't think they'll bother Dade or Hillsborough, but you never know. We seem to have a target on our backs here. So Judge Robert Lee is on that committee for Broward County. So y'all make nice with Judge Lee and tell him, to advocate to keep the 17th Judicial Circuit, the 17th Judicial Circuit. Anything further, Mr. I'm on top of it, but
Madam Chair, if I could real quick, if we could, since the jail and the funding came to the Senator's district, if we can ask her, she can help us get an update, see if there's any movement.
I was going to ask for a legislative update as well. Any legislation, and then for the jail real quick, because we got 2 minutes left.
So quickly, government does not move fast like that. So the appropriations, the monies were appropriated. They have to then be dispersed and plans have to be drawn. So it's going to take us some time, but I think it's very important that when those decisions are made, that we have good representation on those committees. The same thing with the money for Live Local Act, that with housing to help with first-time home ownership. That money will eventually be dispersed to the city and county governments. And we need to pay attention of how they're using those funds. I'm going to stop right there with legislative updates because it could be a lot. If you don't subscribe to the Senate District 32 email blast, I'm going to ask that you do so because we continue to put in writing. I do also want to add that we've written 3 op-eds this week around various issues. So we're trying to use our platform with the newspaper, our Senate office, and I'm going
1 minute left.
Go back to each of you because I'm looking for hidden figures of Black history that I can use as a part of my.
Doc, I got 1 minute left. So anything else legislative or anything, if you all get in touch with her office, and I'll entertain at this time a motion to adjourn. We're over time. Is there a motion?
So moved that we adjourn.
All right, it requires no second. This meeting is officially adjourned, and we'll do better next time. We'll start on time, but we do need quorums in order to do our business. So we went about an hour and 7 minutes without a quorum. So see you all in September.